Before the sun rises, before the noise begins, before the demands of the world pull at your attention, there is a moment, quiet and sacred. It's in that moment the soul whispers what the heart already knows. God, I need your presence this morning. Not out of routine, not out of habit, but out of a deep, holy desperation. Because the truth is, life does not wait. The world doesn't pause. It spins fast, and it expects you to keep up. But before you lace your shoes, check your phone, or plan your schedule, there is a more urgent need, one that cannot be ignored without cost. The need to connect with the one who already knows what your day holds. Not just for blessing, but for guidance. Not just for protection, but for peace. Not just to speak, but to listen. This is not about religion. It's about relationship. It's about returning to the source of your strength before you even take your first step. It's a cry, not of weakness, but of wisdom. God, I won't make it through this day unless you go with me. And if you truly believe that, then this morning is not just another beginning, it's an altar. The essential need for God's presence each morning is not merely a spiritual luxury, it is the lifeline of the soul. When we wake up, our minds are often clouded with thoughts, burdens, and the weight of unfinished tasks. The world meets us with expectations, noise, distractions, and an invisible pressure to perform, achieve, and prove ourselves. Yet in the midst of all this, there exists a deeper, more profound need. The need for communion with the Creator. This need is not about religious routine or duty. It is about alignment with the very source of life itself. When we speak of needing God's presence, we are acknowledging a spiritual reality that surpasses physical needs. Just as the body craves nourishment and rest, the soul longs for its Maker. God's presence is not merely a theological concept or an emotional experience. It is the sustaining power that gives meaning to every breath we take and every step we plan to take. Without it, we may have motion but no direction, success but no satisfaction, activity but no peace. Morning time offers a sacred opportunity to reset. Each day is like a blank page, and what we write on it is often shaped by what we allow into our spirit at the very beginning. If the first thing we allow is the barrage of news, noise, or negative thinking, then our day is already dictated by chaos before we even leave the house. But when we begin with a deep cry for God's presence, when we humble ourselves before Him and seek His face, we are no longer trying to control the day. We are offering it back to the one who already holds it. There is a difference between merely believing in God and walking with Him. Many acknowledge His existence, yet few cultivate His presence. The difference lies in invitation. God does not force His way into our day. He waits to be invited. And when we invite Him into our mornings, something changes. Not always around us, but within us. Our worries shrink in the presence of His peace. Our confusion fades in the light of His wisdom. Our fear loses power in the face of His nearness. The soul that begins its day in God's presence is not immune to trouble, but is empowered through it. It sees beyond the surface, lives beyond the temporary, and walks with a quiet strength that cannot be explained by circumstances. This is why the psalmist cried, "In your presence is fullness of joy." Not outside of it, not beside it, in it. To begin without God's presence is to lean on our own understanding, which is finite, flawed, and frail. To begin with Him is to lean into His strength, His purpose, and His peace. The need for His presence is not about surviving the day. It is about living it rightly. When we truly understand this, we stop rushing into the day and start bowing before it begins, because we know, without Him, we have everything to do, but no real reason to do it. The morning is not just a change in the clock or a shift in the sky's color, it is a divine invitation. Each new dawn is a canvas painted by God's mercy, a quiet whisper that yesterday's failures do not define today's potential. In the spiritual life, the morning carries a sacred weight. It is more than a natural beginning. It is a spiritual door. As the world stretches itself awake, heaven offers a moment to align the heart, mind, and will with the presence of the Almighty. This is why the early moments of the day are not meant to be consumed by the rush of routine, but consecrated through surrender. When the soul wakes, it is vulnerable. It is at that fragile intersection between stillness and striving, between rest and responsibility. What we place into our spirit during these first waking moments often sets the emotional and spiritual tone for the rest of the day. A heart that begins with God finds direction even in uncertainty, while a heart that begins in distraction will often chase noise all day long. The morning gives us a rare chance to quiet the world before the world begins to speak. And in that stillness, surrender becomes not a ritual, but a necessity. Surrender in the morning is not about giving up control in defeat. It is about placing control where it always belonged, in the hands of God. It is acknowledging that no plan, no schedule, no intention has lasting value if it is not rooted in divine wisdom. Morning surrender is not weak, it is wise. It is the posture of someone who recognizes that the battles ahead are not just physical or intellectual, but deeply spiritual, and the only way to win them is to be rightly aligned with the one who sees the whole field. This sacred moment of surrender each morning is also a reflection of trust. It says to God, "Before I face the world, I want to face you." It means letting go of assumptions, releasing yesterday's anxiety, and opening the heart for fresh direction. In doing so, we do not just seek God's help, we seek His rule. There is a difference. Many seek God as a helper, a last-minute addition to their plans, but the soul that surrenders in the morning says, "Lord, write the plan yourself." Such surrender is also deeply personal. It is not simply a mental act or spoken words. It is a laying down of burdens we cannot name and desires we dare not voice. It is trusting that God knows us better than we know ourselves, and that He will lead us not according to our fears, but according to His love. The morning is where this intimate exchange happens, not out of performance, but out of relationship. God is not watching the clock. He is watching the heart. And the heart that bows early will stand strong late. Surrender in the morning is not just a gesture of faith, it is an act of worship that shapes everything that follows. God's presence brings clarity and confidence in ways the human mind cannot fully comprehend. In a world saturated with noise, opinions, and constant movement, there is something profoundly steadying about the nearness of God. While the world offers strategies, self-help advice, and motivational quotes to help us face the day, there is a deeper need beneath all of that. A need for a voice that cuts through the clutter, a presence that brings order to inner chaos. That is what God's presence does each morning. It does not merely calm us, it defines us. It does not simply encourage us, it anchors us in truth. Clarity is one of the first gifts of divine presence. The human mind, though intelligent and capable, is constantly clouded by emotion, fatigue, distraction, and fear. Decisions that appear urgent may not be important. Paths that seem attractive may lead to ruin. But when a person quiets themselves before God, when they allow His Spirit to search their soul and speak to their heart, they begin to see not just what is in front of them, but what lies beneath and beyond. God grants a kind of spiritual discernment that is not taught in books or learned in classrooms. It comes from abiding in His nearness, from listening more than speaking, and from trusting more than analyzing. In that divine closeness, confusion begins to untangle. What seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. What once triggered anxiety loses its power. That is because God does not just provide answers, He provides presence, and His presence carries a peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace does not ignore the storms of life, it simply makes them less threatening. When God is near, the waves still crash and the wind still blow, but the soul is anchored. God does. The person who begins the day with God sees circumstances differently. Not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of faith. With clarity comes confidence. This confidence is not arrogance or pride. It is not rooted in personal ability, status, or control. It is born from knowing who walks beside you. When a person has been in the presence of God, they are not easily shaken by human opinion or temporary failure. Their identity is not shaped by headlines or applause. They move through the day not needing validation from others, because they have already heard the most important voice, the one that says, "You are mine." This confidence manifests in small, hidden ways. It shows up in how one speaks, responds, chooses, and prays. It does not need to prove itself because it knows whose it is. That kind of quiet strength is rare in the world, but it is the fruit of those who make space for God in the early hours. Clarity and confidence do not appear by accident. They grow from relationship, and that relationship must be nourished daily. Especially in the morning, when the soul is most open and the heart most honest. When God is invited in first, everything else begins to take its rightful place. Starting the day without God's presence is like setting sail without a compass, or stepping into battle without armor. It is not simply a matter of missing a quiet moment. It is exposing oneself to the noise, confusion, and spiritual conflict of the world with no defense. The morning is not just another part of the day. It is the foundation. What is laid at the beginning determines the strength of everything that follows. And when that foundation is built without prayer, without surrender, without the acknowledgement of God's authority and nearness, we walk through the day relying solely on our own limited strength, perspective, and wisdom. A spiritually empty start may appear harmless on the surface. The world around us pushes for productivity, quick results, and self-sufficiency. It is easy to jump into emails, news, plans, or social media and believe that momentum equals success. But beneath that surface is a dangerous illusion, the belief that we are in control. That illusion is comforting until reality strikes, a harsh word, an unexpected challenge, a sudden anxiety, a decision we are unprepared for. In those moments, the lack of spiritual grounding reveals itself. What we ignored in the morning begins to cost us by the afternoon. When the soul is not centered in God's presence, it becomes reactive rather than intentional. It reacts to pressure with impatience, to fear with worry, to offense with anger. These reactions are not simply emotional, they are spiritual symptoms of a heart that did not pause to receive divine peace and guidance. Without God's presence, even our best intentions can be driven by pride or fear. We may seek to do good, but we do it on our own terms and in our own strength. And that quickly leads to burnout, frustration, and spiritual dryness. The danger of a spiritually empty start is not just in what happens to us, but in what is happening within us. The heart becomes restless, the mind becomes cluttered, the soul becomes distant from the very one who gives it life. We begin to live as if God is an emergency resource rather than a daily companion. We reach for Him only when things go wrong rather than walking with Him so things go right. And over time, that distance turns into discouragement. We wonder why we feel far from God, why peace is missing, why joy seems out of reach. Yet the answer is often found in the moments we chose to fill with everything except Him. The morning is a spiritual battlefield, disguised as routine. Every day, forces seen and unseen work to shape our thoughts, decisions, and attitudes. Without inviting God into that space, we fight those battles unarmed. It is not enough to believe in God, we must also begin with Him. To neglect His presence at the start is not a small oversight. It is the first step towards spiritual vulnerability. The soul was never meant to stand alone, and each day that begins without God increases the weight of walking without Him. Prayer in the morning is more than a religious act or a spiritual habit. It is an open invitation for God to lead, protect, and shape the course of the entire day. It is in those early moments, when the world is still quiet and the heart is most unguarded, that prayer becomes a powerful bridge between the finite and the infinite. Through prayer, we do not merely speak into the silence, we enter into the presence of the one who holds all things together. And when we do, we are not just heard, we are guided. Morning prayer is a declaration that we do not want to take one step without divine direction. The decisions we face throughout the day, whether large or small, are never as simple as they seem. Each choice carries weight. Words have consequences. Encounters with people carry opportunities for impact or misstep. Our human perspective, though sincere, is limited. We see what is in front of us. God sees what is ahead of us. Morning prayer opens the heart to that divine foresight. It humbles us to acknowledge that our best ideas may not be His will, and that our strongest plans are nothing without His breath upon them. In those moments of morning surrender, we ask not only for help, but for wisdom. We are not seeking shortcuts through hardship. We are asking for the strength to walk the right path, even if that path is difficult. This is the difference between prayer that is self-centered and prayer that is God-centered. The latter does not just plead for comfort. It pleads for clarity. It says, "Lord, shape my thoughts before I shape my actions. Lead my spirit before I lead others. Correct my posture before I make decisions that affect those around me." Along with guidance, morning prayer is a shield. The unseen battles of life, temptation, fear, distraction, discouragement, begin early. Often before the first meeting, the first meal, or the first challenge, the enemy of our soul begins his work. A day unguarded by prayer is a day open to the subtle attacks that wear down faith, twist truth, and steal peace. Prayer places a barrier between us and that spiritual vulnerability. It doesn't mean difficulty will vanish, but it does mean our hearts will be covered, our thoughts protected, and our responses shaped by something higher than impulse. This kind of protection is not passive, it is deeply active. When we pray, we engage heaven in our earthly reality. We align our fragile humanity with God's eternal strength. We welcome the Holy Spirit not only to walk with us, but to walk through us. Every encounter becomes an opportunity for grace. Every pressure becomes a place of growth, and every moment becomes sacred because it has been surrendered. To begin the day without prayer is to assume we can handle what we have not seen. To begin it with prayer is to trust the one who sees it all and still walks beside us with love and power. There is a truth both tender and often forgotten. God longs for fellowship with us even more than we long for Him. It is easy to imagine ourselves as the seekers, the ones in pursuit of the divine, constantly reaching upward to a distant God. But Scripture and the story of redemption tell a different reality. From the beginning, it has been God who seeks, who calls, who knocks, who waits. Morning prayer is not merely our attempt to reach God, it is our response to a divine invitation already extended. It is not about beginning a relationship each day, but returning to one that has always been present, waiting, desiring to be known. This longing of God for communion with His children is not driven by need, for He is self-sufficient. It is driven by love, a love so deep that He stepped into time, bore human weakness, suffered rejection, and embraced death just to make that fellowship possible. When we rise in the morning and turn our attention to God, we are not initiating something new. We are stepping into something eternal. He has already prepared that moment. He has already been there, waiting for us to wake, listening for the first stirrings of our heart. There is something deeply personal about this divine pursuit. God does not seek to be known in crowds only. He seeks to be known in solitude. He speaks not just in sermons, but in silence. Morning prayer becomes the sacred meeting place between a seeking soul and a God who has already come near. It is not performance, it is presence. It is not about saying the right words, but about bringing the true self, the anxious self, the weary self, the uncertain self, and laying it all before a God who is not surprised by any of it. This is the God who met Adam in the cool of the day, who whispered to Elijah in a still small voice, who called Samuel in the quiet of night, and who drew near to David in his solitude. That same God waits for us each morning. When we understand that God desires this fellowship, prayer becomes less of an obligation and more of a homecoming. We are not trying to earn attention, we are answering love. That changes everything. It transforms the morning from a routine into a reunion. It shapes our requests not as demands, but as conversations with a Father who already knows our needs, but still delights to hear our voice. In that space, the soul softens, the mind clears, and the heart finds rest, not because everything is solved, but because we are no longer carrying it alone. This longing of God is not an abstract idea. It is as real as the breath we take when we wake up. He who formed us desires not just our work or our worship, but our presence. Morning prayer honors that divine desire. It draws us into the intimacy we were created for, and reminds us that before we face the world, we are already fully seen, fully known, and deeply loved by the one who called the day into being. As the day stretches before you with its unknowns, challenges, and divine opportunities, remember this: you were never meant to walk through it alone. The presence of God is not a distant ideal, it is a present promise. He waits not just to bless your journey, but to walk each step beside you. Every morning you rise is not just a routine, it is a holy invitation. An invitation to surrender before striving, to listen before speaking, to trust before acting. When you begin with God, you align your heart with heaven's rhythm. Peace replaces panic, clarity overcomes confusion, and strength flows where weakness once lived. So let today not be led by impulse or fear, but by the gentle voice of the one who knows your name and has already gone before you. Let your first breath be a prayer, your first thought be surrender, and your first step be taken in faith. For when you begin with God's presence, you do not merely start the day, you anchor it in eternity. And that kind of beginning changes everything.